Please secure the doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right. This morning, we are pleased to be virtually joined by Bishop Andrew Best of Worship World in Laurel, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from District 21. Members, please rise for the invocation.
Of the great state of Maryland. We're here today to get some business done. Let's pray first. Our Father, on this wonderful day, we give you thanks and we give you praise. You allowed us to open our eyes on this morning, and for that we just take a moment to pause to simply say, thank you. As we've gathered together today to handle the business and affairs of the great state of Maryland, we ask for your guidance. We ask for your wisdom. We ask that you would be the pilot in our hearts to make the greatest and best decisions on behalf of the state and on behalf of the great residents of this state. We thank you that you've entrusted us with these positions and you've entrusted us to lead. So we ask for your guidance as we do just that. We will always be careful to give you honor and to give you praise that you deserve, acknowledging that our help and our strength comes from you. Name of the one that saved my life. Amen.
Chair recognizes the senator from District 21.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move that the bishop's prayer be journalized.
Thank you, Senator. Without objection, we will journalize the bishop's wonderful remarks and invocation this morning on this Ash Wednesday. All right. Let's see. Has everybody recorded their presence in the chamber? It appears so. The clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. All right, a couple notes, Senators, from just an administrative perspective. First and foremost, reminder on the masks. We're getting comments both from staff and from those who are watching the live streams. Masks have to be worn over one's nose the entire time. This is a critical component and the most important precaution. So sometimes it slides down. We know it's often inadvertent. The chair will stop session to just remind folks in the case that it is not being worn correctly. But it's not worth wearing if it's not worn right. The second note is reminder on the administrative precautions of the chamber and the State House. We know we have this huge room. We've taken all of the chairs and sofas out from behind the Senate. We are trying to avoid the congregation in the State House. It is cold outside, so certainly that's not pleasant. But it is really important that we do not congregate behind the chamber, in the hallways, in the Senate lounge, and please be expeditious when you are entering and exiting the chamber, because it is in all of our best interests that we're not congregating in close proximity. So just a very quick reminder, please, when you are leaving today, and I'll mention it again when we're leaving, please just respectfully head out the doors. If there are meetings, please try to do them remotely or outside. All right, any discussion on those points? If not, any other announcements for the day?
Mr. President?
Yes. Yes, Senator from Harford County.
Yes, I would like to say that I really appreciate all the safety precautions that have been put in. I know that folks are really looking out for the health and well-being of our members, but we get to a point where it may be a little bit of overkill when we're all tested on a Tuesday, we're negative, we're all in our hamster cages every day, and then we can't even congregate for just 2 or 3 people in the Senate lounge to talk briefly. I really appreciate the cautiousness for our safety, but I think sometimes this stuff can just be taken a little too far, but that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and your opinion is certainly respected and understand. Look, this is a first for all of us, and the good news is we are a month in, and I almost don't want to say this out loud and jinx us, but we are, yeah, I know, there's the protocol committee chair waving her hands to tell me don't say it. The precautions have thus far been working, so that there's no projection about the future, but we have been spared what other legislatures have not been spared from. And if there was recently actually I will ask our office to send out the article that was done in the AP that talked about all of the other legislatures in the last few months. And I think it was something like 14 of the 50 states that are meeting have had significant outbreaks among their membership. Knock on wood, things have been working well here in Maryland, and I think we're almost there. The senator's point is taken, and please note is in no way anything other than a desire to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and safe, and we can get our work done on behalf of the people of Maryland. All right. Any other announcements? Other announcements? All right. If not, let's go ahead and jump in. Without objection, or we will waive the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. Let's go ahead and start. We have some Senate bills here. These are all headed to the Rules Committee. This is Introductory Calendar 26. The clerk will read the bills.
Senate Bill 937, Senator Ellis, Housing and Community Development, Mortgage, Down Payment, and Settlement Expense Assistance. Senate Bill 937.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. Next order of business is the introduction of the Senate bond initiatives, calendar number 17. Clerk will read the bond initiatives.
Senator Simonera, Marley Nick School Center. Senator Simonera, Northeast High School Physical Endurance Training Course. Senator Jennings, Aviation Career Trade School.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bond initiatives. Next order of business are some first readers from the House. This is calendar number 3 of House bills sent over. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 6, Senator Feldmark, Economic Development, Maryland Technology Development Corporation Alterations, Finance. House Bill 7, Delegate.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. The next order of business is an announcement by the President. It looks like we have a reassignment of a House bill. The clerk will read the announcement.
In accordance with Rule 33D, the following legislation has been reassigned as indicated below. House Bill 457, Delegate Dumais, Insurance Application of Premium Tax, Continued Exclusion of Maryland Automobile Insurance Fund, reassigned to Finance and Budget and Taxation.
The message is adopted. All right. Let's start with our layover calendar. This is layover calendar number 6. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 83, Senator Kramer, Utility Regulation, Consideration of Climate and Labor. Question is on the adoption of the committee amendments to and the favorable report.
All right, Senators, the question before the body is on the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. We'll start with the amendments, but the chair recognizes the senator from Anne Arundel County. What purposes?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the floor leader.
Question for the floor leader. Will the floor leader yield for a question? It appears so. Senator may proceed.
Good morning, my friend.
Where are you? There you are. Questions came up after I laid the bill over, and I just wanted to clarify it for the body. One of the requirements of the bill was the PSC is to review submissions for different types of projects moving forward in the state of Maryland.
Different types of what? I apologize. I am having a little difficulty hearing you.
Public Service Commission is supposed to review projects coming before them within the state of Maryland.
Correct.
Does that include all issues brought before the PSC, including lift, peer-to-peer, telecommunications? Everything that is submitted has to fall under this evaluation?
Oh, no. If the question is, do the requirements under the bill before us apply to anything beyond power stations or transmission lines, the answer is no. So the language that this bill addresses, the purpose that this bill addresses, is with regard to power stations and transmission lines.
And is that clear because of the first part of the bill where it talks about help me with the acronym, RRP something or other?
Yeah, the bill is very clear as to what it applies to and its purpose and intent. So, correct. It's
Okay.
strictly power stations, transmission lines. That is all spelled out in the bill.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from District 34. What purpose does the senator rise?
Yeah, I'm stuck here. Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question for the floor leader, if I could.
Will the floor leader yield? Again, appears so. Senator may proceed.
Thank you. So I'm looking on page 5 of the reprint in section 2113 of the bill, and the bill says that the commission, it talks about what the commission is supposed to consider. It says the commission shall, and it goes through a lot of factors like in supervising that they shall consider public safety, maintenance and fair, stable labor standards, the conservation of natural resources, and now we're adding in preservation of the environment, including global climate from continued short-term effects, and then the achievement of the state's climate emissions. So my question is does the law allow them to consider just the maintenance of continuous public service for utilities? I'm just looking around the country now, and we've got some issues where perhaps that interest there, and just sort of one would assume to be the preeminent interest of the commission in just providing the citizens with reliable, continuous service regardless of weather in times of hardship, during blizzards and the like, would be at the top of this list, but I'm not seeing it. Am I perhaps missing something in the law that's already covered?
I'm not sure what the question exactly is, but it sounds like you're asking, does the Public Service Commission take into account reliability of service in the state? And the answer to that is an absolute yes.
And so my question is that specifically, we're spelling out in the statute these legislative concerns. I guess these would be sort of our primary policies. They're stated specifically, and I don't see amongst the primary concerns that this body has directed to the commission that in this list in section 2113, I just don't see at the top of the list that what we really want here, first and foremost, is reliable, continuous service under all possible conditions.
And I would direct to you that at the very top of the list, just as you just asked about, is the following. The commission shall ensure their operation in the interest of the public. So that is first and foremost the top charge, and it's listed as number 1 on the list that you were just reading from.
Okay, I guess to me the term interest of the public is just sort of a broad generality that doesn't really say a whole lot other than operate them in the interest of the public, and then we go below that and say the interest of the public is safety, fair, stable labor standards, and conservation of natural resources. But we don't really ever say the public the view of this body is that the public interest is first and foremost continuous and reliable service 24/7, 365, regardless of all weather conditions. So, but I understand your position on that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
All right. Question is on the 2 committee amendments. Any further discussion on the amendments? Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from District 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the floor leader yield for a couple questions?
It appears so. Senator may proceed.
I'm trying to look through the reprint here. It talks about power plants. In this bill, are you classifying power plants as wind farms and solar farms? Are they included in this?
These are power stations, so this does not directly address things like wind farms. This addresses power stations. So, and the consideration when looking at these power stations, the effect on the climate and greenhouse gases, and our state goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Maryland.
Well, they are power producing entities. Should they not be included in this? I mean, if we're going in that direction, you would think you would want the Public Service Commission, and they got to get approval, I believe, from Public Service Commission to build windmills and or solar farms. And I know some people wouldn't agree with this, but those two things do pollute, but they pollute kind of after the fact. When they're decommissioned or tore down or whatever, with all the chemicals that are in them and how they get rid of them, so they do kind of do some polluting, but it's kind of after the fact of the machine. But I would think if you want to thoroughly evaluate, you would include the two products that we're really pushing to put into place, which are windmills, wind farms, and solar farms, to be thoroughly evaluated by the Public Service Commission.
Thank you, and I'll share with you that under the language of the bill, an evaluation of the greenhouse gas emissions and climate effects of different electric power generation technologies. So there is the opportunity for the Public Service Commission to, in fact, address the concerns that you are bringing up.
Well, my opinion ought to be a little more thorough than that, but I'm reading here, and I saw a summary earlier on where it was asking about what these companies pay, but I think you struck that out of the reprint. It's not, they don't have to tell people how much they pay their employees, do they, based on the reprint?
That was an amendment adopted in committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, question remains on the two committee amendments. Further discussion on the amendments? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The two committee amendments are adopted. The question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Any discussion on the report? Chair recognizes the senator from the Upper Eastern Shore.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Given the recent events of what we've seen happen in Texas with regards to the energy supply and distribution down there, the difficulties that they're having, I'd like to just see if we could special order this till the end of the day, this session. I've asked for an amendment already. I wasn't able to ask for the amendment while I was in committee. I know that's the proper place to do it. But again, given the events that we've just seen, the bill has already been on the floor. If I could get that amendment, I'd be happy to share it with the bill sponsor first. If we can agree that it would be a friendly amendment, then we can proceed. If it's not agreed that we can do that, then we can just move it on. But I do think it's important that the Public Service Commission also looks at the resiliency and the redundancy of the energy supply grid here in Maryland to make sure that we don't have the same type of situations that we are seeing down in Texas.
Senator, I think we could put it to the end of the calendar. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you, and I apologize. I missed the first part of the good senator's comments, and I'm assuming that was a request to special order the bill yet again?
Just till the end of the
end of the session.
This morning's session.
Waiting for an amendment.
Not tomorrow, not another day. If again the amendment has been requested, I just don't have it yet.
Mr. President, if we have the time to special order it to the appropriate time later today, then I don't have an objection to that.
All right, and why don't we adopt the report first, and then it'll be subject to amendment, and then we'll special order it until the end of the calendar, and we'll see if the amendment has come up at that point.
Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes the Chair of Finance.
If it's okay for me just to make one quick remark, just based on the concerns that a couple of colleagues have just suggested.
Senator may proceed.
In the state of Texas, there is a single entity that operates the entire grid, and it does so based on finances for the company. That's what is going on in Texas. Here we have the PJM as the overseer of the grid, covering several states in our region, and the task and the oversight is much broader. So in Texas, they are unlike anything else in the whole rest of the United States. And we can see that we don't want to be like them.
Thank you, Senator. All right, the question is on the report. The report is amended. Let's go ahead and try and adopt this report. All in favor of the report, say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. The senator from the Upper Eastern Shore has moved to special order the bill until the appropriate time at the end of the calendar today. Are there any objections? Objection, so ordered. The bill will be special ordered to the end of the calendar today, in which time we hope we have an amendment drafted up. All right. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 218, Senator King, Maryland Child Tax Credit. Questions on the adoption of the committee amendments and the favorable report.
Question before the body is on the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report, but first on the amendments. The chair recognizes the senator from Frederick County.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have questions on the
question for the
before
floor
we
leader.
adopt the second reading report.
Will the floor leader yield? Appears so. Senator may
Yes,
proceed.
absolutely. Thank you.
So just want to make sure I have my facts correct. So this is the Relief Act we did expanded the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. This seeks to do the same with individuals that are filed with, not with a Social Security, but filed with an ITIN, individual taxpayer identification number.
The second part of what you said is correct. It's intended to make sure we're treating all taxpayers equally.
Okay. And just so everyone understands what an ITIN is, make sure I have my facts right here. It was created for tax purposes. The ITIN was created in 1996 to allow foreign nationals and other individuals who are not eligible for Social Security to comply with U.S. law. That's correct?
Yeah, it's intended to make sure that people who owe U.S. taxes are able to file their returns and pay their U.S. taxes and state taxes.
ITN is a 9-digit number. Always gets 9 sevens, 4 digits. It is not a Social Security number. So many immigrants have ITINs. People who do not have lawful status in the United States may attain an ITIN. Is that correct?
People who cannot get a Social Security number but are responsible for paying taxes get an ITIN number to be sure they comply with the law.
But you can be unlawfully in the country and obtain an ITIN.
Folks who are lawfully in the country, folks who are not lawfully in the country, if they're working, if they're supposed to pay taxes, we want to make sure they pay taxes. That's what the federal government passed the law. They created it, we didn't.
Yes, they created the ITIN, which 1996 for foreign national companies, which has now been used for folks who are in the country unlawfully. So ITIN cannot be used to prove legal status in the United States, correct?
That is my understanding. It is for tax purposes.
Yes. And it's not used to show that you are legally authorized to work in the United States, correct?
Because this is about the tax law. We want to make sure that everybody who's working here who owes taxes pays their taxes.
Okay. Individuals who file with an ITIN, are they eligible for Social Security benefits in the United States?
Not to my knowledge.
No. Are they eligible for the earned income tax credit federally?
They are not.
They are not. What is their eligibility federally on a child tax credit?
I'm sorry, say it again?
What is their eligibility on a federal child tax credit?
I do not believe they're eligible.
They're not eligible. And why would they not be eligible federally and we're making them eligible at the state level? What is the distinction the federal government made?
Oh, that's pretty easy. The federal government has to make its own decisions about fiscal policy, its own decisions about social policy. It does all the time. We've seen recently over the past 4 years decisions about tax policy at the federal level where they made huge cuts in taxes for big business and very wealthy people. And we don't do that in Maryland. We have some differences.
So the federal government also recently, actually bipartisan, this would have been in 2020 when they did the stimulus. Speaker Pelosi in the Democrat House and Mitch McConnell in the Senate agreed that people with ITN could not receive federal stimulus payments. Isn't that correct?
The bill is passed, in fact, did have that provision because of a compromise at the federal level.
Okay, so everyone agreed at the federal level and all these things. Why? Because these people, how many of these people are unlawful that we're talking about? Of these, how many people, first off, are we talking about that we're giving this credit to?
I believe we're talking about 90,000 people, plus or minus, tax-paying Marylanders who would get the benefit of their tax dollars?
Well, we'll get to that part. Of the 90,000, how many of those 90,000 are in the country unlawfully?
I have no idea.
We have no idea.
I have no idea. Other people may. I have no idea.
We have no way to verify. So we don't know how many are in on a green card, how many are expired green card, how many came in the country unlawfully. We have no idea.
And we also don't know how many are here legally.
Okay. Well, if we do an estimate, let's say that 60,000 of these people are going to receive the benefit, which is what I've told, what is the cost going to be of this program?
I'm not going to make an assumption. You can make an assumption that you want to about that. The cost estimate for this is about $60 million.
Okay, $60 million a year. So we're looking at roughly, this is a 4-year program, about
3 years.
3 years. 3-year program, so we're looking at about almost $200 million, correct? Give or take.
You're doing the math here on your estimates.
All right. Well, if it's $60 million a year, that's $180 million by the math that you gave me over 3 years. So just understand, too, we just had 2 bills that raised revenue reportedly for the Kerwin bill, which would have been when we raised taxes on streaming services, online ads, tobacco. What was the total cost of those revenue increases?
Well, actually, not all of that was for Kerwin. Part of that was for the general fund.
Okay. Well, what was the total? How much new revenue were we bringing in the state on those bills?
On an annualized basis, the big tech tax is estimated to be about $250 million a year. The bill on extending the sales tax to digital products as well as the tobacco tax is in the range of $100 million? $100 million each. So each of those are about $100 million.
Per year?
Per year.
So you're $300 million. So of that $300 million of taxes that we just raised, we're taking at least $60 million of that for this program right here. And so,
with all due respect, Senator, that's not the way those bills dedicate the money. As I said, 2 pieces of it go for improving the schools. About $100 million of it goes to the general fund.
Okay, $100 million. Well, that's even worse because $100 million comes out of the general fund. This all comes out of the general fund, correct?
This is reducing taxes. When you reduce taxes, it comes out of the general fund. I apologize, colleagues. I'm turned off. Go ahead.
Well, we'll debate if it's reducing taxes in a second, but the actual cost here is $60 million we're taking out of the general fund. So we just overrode the governor's veto of 2 pieces of legislation to increase taxes on Marylanders, which will increase general fund revenue by $100 million. This here will reduce it by $60 million, correct?
Well, actually, I disagree with your assumption there. There are two of the taxes we talked about that are directly related to taxes paid by Marylanders. The big tax is paid by big multinational out-of-state companies.
Okay, well, that wasn't the question. The question is, it's $100 million in new tax revenue via the other 2 bills that were override into the general fund. This takes $60 million out of the general fund. That's correct. So lastly, calling this a tax cut, these individuals, if they're making less than $6,000 a year, you give them an earned income tax credit, and then on top of that, a child tax credit. In fact, and it's refundable. So you're going to be receiving, what, a couple $1,000s more from the state of Maryland than you ever paid in. Isn't that correct?
Well, I think you may be confusing the earned income tax credit piece of the amendments and the child tax credit piece. I understand because the words sound very similar. The child tax credit is limited to families with incomes under $6,000, and that provision of the bill, which basically is a structure in which it came in, the purpose of that bill was to close a loophole in the federal child tax credit, not child care, child tax credit. In 2017, when the Congress passed the big tax cuts for wealthy people and big corporations, for reasons that I don't understand, I've tried to find out, they excluded people with incomes under $2,500 a year from getting a child tax credit. The purpose of the bill and the purpose of this provision limited to the disabled is to close that loophole for people so that the very poorest people with kids who are disabled can get some help from the child tax credit, adding to what people above $2,500 at the federal level will get. There's a phase out that I can bore you with if you want to know, but that's what that's about.
All right,
That's separate from the EITC part of the bill.
All right, so does this bill, if you have an ETIN, do you get a Maryland tax credit with this, a child tax credit with this?
It applies to all Maryland
No,
taxpayers.
but just, you keep saying all. You're trying to camouflage what we're talking about.
I'm not trying to camouflage it at all.
ITIN. We're talking about ITIN filers.
There are two ways that people can file tax returns with the United States government
I
and the state of
understand that.
Maryland.
We've been through
One is
that.
using a Social Security number, and one is using
Yes,
an ITIN.
yes. We understand that.
We want to
People-
make sure that all taxpayers have the benefit of their tax dollars.
All right, so under the bill right now, if you file the ITIN, you are eligible for refundable tax credit, yes or no, for child care, or child tax credit refundable.
If you meet the requirements, you would be eligible. And we've
And
had
you're,
refundable.
and you're eligible for an earned income tax credit as well if you file an ITIN, right?
Please repeat it.
If you file, so we've already dealt with the refundable child tax credit. With an ITN filer, you can get. ITN filer, do they also get the earned income tax credit?
All taxpayers, whether they file with a Social Security number or an ITIN, it's all about equity. It's all about a level playing field. It's
So
all
at
about
the end of
treating
the
our
day-
citizens
Excuse me,
equally.
Senator, please.
I'm sorry.
One senator has the
I'm
floor at a
sorry.
time. Please allow the
Okay,
senator to
carry
finish
on.
before.
So with an ITIN filer, they will now receive a check from the state of Maryland if they have, let's say, 3 children and they get the earned income tax credit. They will not only get back everything they paid in, they will get more back based on the fact that they're going to receive a refundable credit, correct?
We have a variety of refundable credits in our tax code. You may be familiar with the cybersecurity tax credit. You may be familiar with the biotech tax credit. We have an enormous, and the movie tax credit. We have a half dozen or more business tax credits, investor tax credits, which are refundable. If you oppose refundable tax credits for business, I hope you will keep that consistent, because refundable tax credits have been around for decades. It's designed to help people. It's designed to help businesses. It's designed to help investors.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Against refundability, I get it, but I'm going to speak for myself here. I don't think we should have refundable tax credits for movie producers, but not for poor people.
I agree. I voted with you a couple times on that. All right, I'd just like to speak on this because I'd actually like to vote on this on second reading. So what we're talking about here is not
Senator, just really briefly.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to vote the amendments or the report?
Sorry, I'll yield to the minority leader. Has questions on the committee amendments?
On the amendments, okay. The chair recognizes the minority leader.
Yes, and thank you. The floor leader would yield, please.
Floor leader, yield for questions.
I'm back. Thank
Senator
you.
may proceed.
I thought I had my questions answered until you answered some on that
Well, there you go.
amendment. So what you stated earlier was the original bill was to right a wrong, or whatever word we want to use.
Yep.
The federal government was not
Yep.
letting these poorest of poor get this. So our attempt was to give that back to them, or give them some credit.
To help them fill in the gap.
So the original sponsor put a bill in that said that would take care of the poorest of poor under 2 conditions. One, if they were under 6 years old, the children, or they were under 17 and had a disability, correct?
Yes.
The committee's amendment struck under 6.
Yes.
Which excluded them from getting that relief. What was the committee's thought process if you're trying to make it fair for the poorest of poor to strike that provision?
Because they would be covered by the earned income tax credit piece of the amendments.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right. On the amendments, the committee amendments. Any further discussion on the amendments? If not, let's go ahead and work to adopt the amendments. Question is on the amendments. All in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The question now is on the favorable committee report as amended. Chair recognizes the senator from Frederick County.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on this because what we are told on the floor is this is tax cuts and get tax credits, giving people their money back. This is not. These programs, and we support them in the Relief Act because there were things in there that were actually tax relief. But these are means-tested welfare programs where people get back more money into the system than they paid in. These are refundable. They'll get back more than they paid in. So now we are taking a program that we were using for Marylanders, and now this bill on the floor explicitly gives it to unlawful immigrants who are in the country, undocumented immigrants who are in the country. So we're going to spend $60 million creating a special welfare program and checks for these individuals. This is not just simply reducing their tax liability. This reduces their tax liability to zero and gives money from taxpayers in Maryland back to them. This incentivizes people who come in the country illegally, break our laws. It's a special program for people in the country illegally. That's what this bill does specifically. So I'm going to oppose this bill, and I'm going to vote against it, and ask for a roll call vote on second reading.
Senators request a roll call vote. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A couple of points of what the gentleman said. First of all, the governor's relief package that we passed, that we all voted for, that the governor signed on Monday, has refundable EITCs for many Marylanders. So exactly what the gentleman argued against, we all voted for, and the governor signed on Monday. It's refundable. It's for people who have too low an income to, in that year, have to pay taxes. They get refundable. We all voted for that last Friday. But last Friday, that only included some working people in Maryland. It only included some taxpayers. What this bill is about, the essence of these amendments, is to make sure that we treat all tax-paying working people in Maryland equally. Yes, it's refundable, just like the bill we all voted on Friday and the governor signed is refundable. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from District 5.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I've been sitting here listening to this debate, and I was aware of the circumstances of this now being something that we have to pass right away due to some hostage negotiations from last week. But I was stunned to realize, and the fiscal note that's in my report does not really do this justice because it obviously the bill's being amended. $60 million a year is what I'm hearing that we're giving to people who basically are not in the country legally, and we keep hearing that, oh, they're taxpayers. They're not. They're filing a return, but they're not really paying taxes. And the gentleman from Prince George's County, who always eloquently argues, his point of view and his perspective is that these are all Marylanders. Well, we have laws for a reason. We have rules for a reason. And yes, we did expand the credit in these very difficult economic times for Maryland taxpayers, Maryland residents. But this is people. This isn't even people who might be here that are not citizens, but here legally working on a green card. This is going to people who are breaking the law. Now, we know the federal immigration system is completely screwed up. We know there's a lot of issues with it. But we can't just start handing out money funded by our taxpayers to give to people who are not here legally. We're setting a terrible precedent. This sounds to me like, if I do my math correctly, and I'm not on the budget committee, but I do know how to add. I think they're better at maybe division and multiplication than I am, but I do know how to add. And $60 million over 3 years is what it sounds like. That's $180 million. To me, it's outrageous that we would be doing this. We're not talking about a handful of people that are sort of falling in between. This is $60 million a year that we're handing out to people who are not here legally. And, I just can't understand, considering the pain and suffering I'm seeing in our communities, that we would do this and then do it for 3 years, not even just 1 year, for 3 straight years. To be clear, I'd be against doing it for 1 year. But to do it for 3 years, and we know what'll happen. We'll come back, and it'll be like, well, we can't take this away now. We just had this huge fight over the Kirwan Commission and over how much money that's going to be. We just raised taxes on small businesses and people who can least afford to pay taxes on things like cigarettes and vaping. And now we're going to basically hand the equivalent of what that almost the half of that back every year to people who are not here legally. well, let's be honest, part of this is because there was a deal we had that had to be struck to get the, I mean, this is very troubling to me, Mr. President. So I say we vote this down. I'm going to be voting red on this second reader.
Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I've been listening to the debate, and one thing I want to emphasize is a lot of these filers who file I-10s have U.S. citizen tax credits and other tax credits like that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in my other job at the comptroller's office, people would come in and they have U.S. citizens as children, and they're already paying sales tax, they're already paying property tax, and they're just trying to do what they can to make sure that they and their family can survive. So this is tax fairness. Federal government already has some of these programs. We're closing a Maryland state loophole here.
All right, senators, we have a number of senators who wish to speak. We'll go back and forth. Chair recognizes the senator from District 34.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we're calling this a loophole. That's interesting because what we're saying is the rest of the country doesn't do that, and so somehow in Maryland it's a loophole. I'm not sure that's how we define a loophole. So here we have a country of over 300 million people, and then we have little old Maryland sitting sort of in the middle of the East Coast with about 7. And we're asking our taxpayers repeatedly to step up and close alleged loopholes in the federal safety nets. Colleagues, I'm not sure that's a fair burden on the Maryland taxpayers. We know based upon what's happened in the unemployment insurance distribution problems with massive rampant fraud that we do have to be very cautious of fraud and misstatements, even though those are made under oath and penalties of perjury, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when here we are with folks who are not documented, we're surrounded by states that will not be giving this additional payout, and at some, if you're going to provide a social safety net, it's absolutely imperative that you establish who's eligible for that. If we're going to be the social safety net for the world, the Maryland taxpayers are going to really get screwed to the wall, and I really think that we owe it to, as shepherds of their tax dollars, that we owe them an extra measure of prudence and diligence to assure that what they're paying is their fair share. And we can't be the policeman to the world here in Maryland. We can't be the Red Cross to the world here in Maryland. And as much as I feel for people, as much as I care for every child in the world, at some point we have to be very cautious, because over $60 million a year is not chump change. This is serious money. And actually, we don't know that that's what it's going to be. That's an estimate. That's an estimate, because it was already stated we really don't know what the impact is going to be, other than based on an estimate. So this just concerns me that we're talking about so far in this session that we're going to provide attorneys for undocumented aliens, whether they have for federal immigration hearings, whether those are in Maryland or in California, we'll provide them with free counsel. We're really stretching the taxpayers' dollars. I think the inequity here is just sort of astounding. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from Baltimore County. Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. As I listen, what comes to mind, colleagues, is that we all are here either by chance or by divine providence. And none of us were a God sitting out in the ether somewhere determining how the world would be populated, or the United States. Some, but not all of my forebears, were dragged here. They didn't ask to come. And they did work that nobody has paid them for now. We need to stop being self-righteous and to think about the fact that the people that you're talking about withholding this little credit from are people who, in many cases, are cleaning the bathrooms where we go in public spaces. They are doing the work that many Americans who say they are citizens don't want to do. They are not sitting on the sidelines doing nothing but waiting for a credit. They are at the bottom of the round socioeconomically here in this country, but they are a part of the economic infrastructure without which a lot of us would need to demote ourselves from where we think we are in the pecking order of the economic paradigm, so that that work, which is absolutely essential, could be done. We are not talking about people unknown to the federal government. These are working people, and that's why they can file in the mode that is available to them. I would just say that we should thank God that we're where we are, but none of us is here because we are so worthy. We are here because of divine providence, or depending on your point of view, by chance. And we need to be fair to other Americans who are working, who are struggling, and who are doing the work that many of us in our families don't want to do, but work which is absolutely essential for the well-being of the body politic and all of the rest of us. Pay these poor people that little credit that they deserve. They're known to the federal government. If they were crooks, they wouldn't have that ID number that they're using. They are hard-working Americans with children that in many cases are models for our children. They are some of the most respectable citizens among us. We should emulate them and not denigrate them. Thank you. I won't say more.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next, we have a senator from District 35.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I brought up before how blessed and fortunate I feel to be able to represent the folks of Harford and Cecil County in District 35 in the Maryland Senate. And that's all the folks, and you know, my heart goes out to the folks that don't have it as well as others. But also, you know, I represent the taxpayers, the folks that fund all these different programs that we decide how this money is going to be doled out. So I really worry that this would set a precedent and head us down a road that we don't particularly want to go down. I look at this $60 million starting out, coming out of the general fund, as we've heard mentioned earlier, and I think of what all other good causes that money could go to. I mean, there are a lot of folks that want a piece of the pie, so to speak. There's a lot of great causes. So, you know, we have to determine what's the best use of these funds. And I think of what possible programs could be unfunded and things in each of our districts, you know, that could be unfunded. I just have a severe concern that once we start down this road, as a colleague mentioned earlier, you know, how do we go back? You know, once you give out this, I think one of the senators called it kind of like a welfare program. We all know that once government gets involved and opens up the door to some new program, none of these programs seem they go away or get tampered back. So, on behalf of the taxpayers of my district, you know, I will be opposing this measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from Prince George's County, 47th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the floor leader yield for a question?
Will the floor leader appear so? Senator may proceed.
Yes, sir.
Are I-10 filers taxpayers?
Yes.
Would it surprise you to know that from the I-10 filers and the people who live in my district, many of whom are Latino immigrants, that they provide over $100 million to the state coffers each year? Would that surprise you?
It wouldn't surprise me, but with all due respect, Senator, that's only the income tax they pay. They also pay sales taxes. They pay property taxes directly when they own a home. They pay it through their rent when they rent. They also pay telecommunications taxes when they make phone calls. They pay hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes to state and local governments every year.
That's what I thought. I really do appreciate that. That's what I understood to be the case. Is it also true that a number of these folks who are my neighbors have suffered unbelievably, actually more so than many other Marylanders during this crisis, this pandemic?
You know your district better than anyone. I'm only next to your district.
Yes, you are.
And I know that your district is the epicenter of the COVID crisis. The rate of transmission, the rate of death, the rate of danger is highest in exactly the kind of community that you're talking about that you represent. That's why last Friday we passed the governor and the legislature's COVID response bill, and that's why today we want to make sure that all the working taxpayers in your district and everyone else's district get the help they need.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, I had the senator from Chair had the senator from District 29. Just want to make sure I didn't miss.
Thank you, Mr. President. When we started discussing this, I listened very intently to different colleagues who got up and spoke about this. And one of them stood up and tried to justify their argument, saying that we should do this because the federal government does it. Now, I just say that we all know what's going on in Washington. And just because the federal government does it, sure doesn't make it right. I appreciate my colleague from Harford County. I, too, have a lot of hardworking people that pay their taxes, and their tax money should come back to benefit them and what they do. When we talk about who suffered more during this pandemic, I don't know how we can justify and say, well, this person, because they cleaned the bathroom, suffered more than a person whose small business was shut down and they had to forego and give up all the people that had worked for them for years. Everyone suffered. I think that at some point in time, we need to follow the rules and support the people that pay the taxes and have jobs and work here all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from Charles County, District 28.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, in discussion with this bill, we talk about the I-10, the individual taxpayer identification number, people who file using that number. And if you look up the individual tax identification number, it'll tell you what it's all about. It's about allowing taxpayers who don't have a Social Security number to file income tax returns. ITIN only have one purpose, that's tax filing and reporting. So if you file taxes, that means you pay taxes. Now, who are the people who file the ITIN? You know, colleagues on the other side of the aisle say, well, they're illegal. Well, no one is illegal. They're undocumented. Well, that's not 100% true. Filers of the individual taxpayer identification number are non-resident aliens who are required to file a tax return. Required. They're also resident aliens who are required to file a tax return due to the number of days they reside in the U.S. They're also dependents or spouses of U.S. citizens. Dependents or spouses of U.S. citizens. And also dependents or spouse of non-resident aliens who are visa holders. So, you know, it's broader than we think. We cannot just pick one group of folks and let people think that these are all the people that would benefit from this particular bill. So I just want my colleagues to know that it's a broader issue. Let's not look at just one tiny part of this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to bring this discussion back to the core. It's not about being self-righteous. It's about a philosophical difference. We have laws. Should we obey them? And should we, as a body, take money from tax-paying citizens to give money to those who are unlawfully in our state? It's just a basic philosophical question. Before I joined the Senate, I traveled all over the world. I've probably been to 25 or more different countries. And I've talked to a lot of foreigners. And I constantly heard they would love to come to America and try to have their dream here. That was the ultimate. Probably tens, hundreds of millions of people would love to come here and have the opportunity to live in America and live out their dream. That is the biggest privilege of anyone living in this country. It's not whether they get a tax refund from us, it's that they are living in the greatest country of the United States. So I don't feel sorry for those who come here illegally. They reached their dream. They got to America. And they get all kind of benefits across America. We hear about them, well, they paid some taxes. Well, you know what those taxes provide? Services, not a tax refund. They get nice roads to drive on. They get their trash picked up. They get free K through 12 education. And in fact, this body has said, you know what? We're even going to give you a free community college with the Promise Scholarship. And we'll actually put you in the front of the line if you're poor, in front of citizens. We just raised $100 million in taxes last Friday from people suffering from COVID, pandemic. We said the timing is, this is so urgent that we raise taxes. We have to do it in the beginning of session. We understand you're in a pandemic, but we must raise taxes. So we can put $100 million into our general fund. These are people who are using Hulu, Netflix, ebooks, and you just go down the list. The very things people are using to cope with the pandemic, we said it's important that we tax them now. And we get that money from them, even though they're hurting, because we need that money. And I really didn't understand why we needed that money so urgently. I didn't realize this bill was coming out. 60 million of that money that's going in the general fund is now going to fund this. I see the correlation now. We want to help those who are unlawfully in our state to get over $60 million. And not just during a pandemic. This goes for 3 years. Almost $200 million of taxpayers' money is going to go to those who are here unlawfully. And we heard about tax fairness again today. We heard about that last Friday. We have to raise these taxes because it's fair. We have to give to those who are unlawfully because it's fair. This body's idea of fairness is raising taxes on people during a pandemic so we can give that money to people who are unlawfully in our state. That is not fair. It's a philosophical difference, but I ask you to vote red on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from Howard County for Chair Budget and Tax.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to first start by agreeing with the senator from Carroll County. He said earlier that I think something that we all know inherently, that the federal government and the system on immigration in both form and function has been an abject failure. It has created confusion and unfortunately, in my opinion, through over-politicizing something, has made it impossible to get us to a stable place. Let me just give you one example of the problems associated with the system and how this bill applies to it directly. Let me point out, folks that I know are in the paper all the time, we've seen
the folks who pick crabs down on the Eastern Shore. Those folks come here under a H-2B visa. Now, under an H-2B visa, you actually can obtain a Social Security number. So you've got two individuals who are sitting next to each other who came here with this visa. But just because the nature of the system, the function of the system, the failure of how the processing of all this is done, there are folks right now sitting down there who have a Social Security number next to someone because of the way that process is working. The person next to them doesn't have their Social Security number. They both have the right to be here. They both are doing a job. They both want to pay their taxes. The second individual needs an ITIN to do it. The system, and that's just one example of the complications of trying to get this right and the failure on the part of the federal government to get it right. It's complicated. There's hundreds of different stories. So what do you do? What do you do when you know a system has failed? And philosophically, to get back to the minority leader's point, what do you do in the middle of a pandemic when people are hurting, where communities are hurting, where an infusion of dollars actually can make a huge difference in communities for all the people in those communities? What do you do? What do you do when you know the system doesn't work? Well, in my opinion, you got to sort of pull back as a human and think about social justice and think about what's right. And since we can't get it right in the big sense because the federal government has to do that, it's my opinion we have to get it right here in our communities for people who are suffering. I urge everyone to support this legislation.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a lot of laws in this country, let alone laws in this state, but we put them in place for a very, very good reason. I cannot leave this country unless I have my passport. Why? Because we put that law in place to make sure that they know where I'm at, one thing. But legally, I can go to another country with a passport. Our country has put many laws in place so we can know where people are, what people are doing. We have green cards, we have visas, but we have these laws in place so they can come here. Yes, this is the greatest country in the world, and we are blessed. We are blessed in such a way that people are fighting to get here. Why? Because they know what America is all about, what we have stood for, what we have fought for. But we put these laws in place so we obey the laws. So we do things legally. So we do things in a proper manner where we have decency and we have order. When we don't obey these laws, we don't have order. When we break these laws, we are not law-abiding citizens, let alone law-abiding. That's one of the problems that we have, because at times we do get lenient. And this is one of the ways that we are getting lenient, by letting people come here that not are documented. We have reasons, and we have laws, and we have ways. We need to continue to do those things. We come here to Annapolis to have bills, to have hearings, to do things in manners, and that's why we are here today. So we are fighting, and fighting a good fight right now. We have a great debate going on. And this is a good thing. That's what Maryland is all about. And other states and Washington can learn by that. But I think more than anything, that I know we got to give what is the Caesar to Caesar and give unto God what is God. And that's one thing I can definitely say, that we do that. But we still have to obey the laws. And this is one way that we can obey the laws, but make sure everybody's here legally and in proper manner. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from Montgomery County, Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually wasn't going to rise initially, but I was moved to do so by the chairman of Budget and Tax. And I've been thinking about the year we've been through, the social inequities that we've had to address, the racial inequities we've had to deal with in the last 4 years we've been through. And these are kind of the generational convulsions that every generation deals with: civil rights, social rights. And so, when some of the stories I've received have actually moved me a little bit, so I apologize to you. But these perennial issues that we deal with sometimes get lost in the complex debate over tax policy. And so I just wanted to share with you a story from my district. A story of a woman named Sarah Ramirez who lives in Long Branch with her husband and her elderly mother. Now, they're both citizens, and one of her sons is actually a U.S. veteran of the United States Marines, fought in Iraq. Now, because of the way that our policy is placed, she's ineligible because there are 81,000 families of mixed combination, legal status and otherwise. And so what this bill does will fix that and provide some relief, a modicum of relief for her family. Now, these families, these 81,000 families or individuals, have provided over $100 million of tax money into our communities. Now, the relief that they get, it's not going to go into maximizing a 401k or investing in some sort of a stock. It's going to be reinfused into our communities. It's going to be used to pay rent and to buy groceries. And so, Mr. President, again, I'll end where I started off, that every generation deals with these kind of convulsions that deal with xenophobia, racial equity, social equality. This is a small measure that we can take today to ensure that we live up to the obligations of our generation. So I appreciate the time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of the favorable committee report as amended. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't going to stand up on this morning. I think we've had this conversation here in this chamber over and over and over again. But I'm listening to the discussion about the people who will be getting money from this bill. The people in my district, and I'm quite sure in all the other districts that we're talking about, are not looking to get rich from this by any means. They come to this country because they're starving and living on the streets, most of them from the countries that they're coming from. All they're looking for is a life for themselves and their families. If anybody is going to get anything out of this amendment on this bill, I'm telling you, they won't get rich. They might be able to buy a little bit of food for their families, maybe pay a little bit of rent. But I, on this Ash Wednesday, really think that we have to take care of all of us, not just the ones who happen to be fortunate enough to have been born in this country. So I will be supporting this bill.
Thank you, Senator. All right, the question is on the adoption of the favorable committee report as amended. Minority Whip has requested a roll call. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the affirmative, the favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes the minority leader with an amendment.
Yes, please.
Senator, if you could just give us the number of the amendment.
Sure. So it's SB 218/833323/1.
All right, just give us one moment. All right. Everybody have it in the floor system? Has it come up? It appears so. Senator, may explain the amendment.
Thank you. During this debate, which I think was a good debate, clearly laid out the policy and philosophical differences we had, but it was done in a civil manner, so I appreciate that. We heard testimony on this floor that the original bill was trying to help the most vulnerable and the poorest, and I commend the sponsor for putting that bill in. I believe that was for people who made $6,000 or less. So this would actually be the poorest citizens in our state, the most vulnerable, only $6,000 a year. And what this amended bill did was it struck out all those people except for those under 17 with a disability. And we're given a choice here. Should we spend this money not on the people in the EIC who are making $50,000, $40,000, $60,000 a year, but should we go back to the intent of the original bill and go to those who are making the very least, the ones who could use this money the most? They may get some money from the Relief Act, but I tell you, it's not enough. When you're making $6,000 a year, getting $1,000 isn't going to do it. But this would give them an extra $500 under my amendment. It would restore those under 6, but not only that, it would expand it to any child in this situation, under 18. And I've talked with legal counsel, and it would be less than the bill we are putting forward with $60 million. It would be incorporated within that, even less money for that, to give it to those our citizens who are hurting the worst. $6,000 a year, opposed to this bill that's before us is saying give it to those who are unlawfully, who are making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. This amendment says, let's take care of the most vulnerable in our state first. And if you want to bring another bill back, you can deal with this. But we have to take care of those that are hurting the worst in our state first before we start giving it to those who are unlawfully in our country. It just doesn't make sense to ignore those poorest in our society and give it to those who are unlawfully making much bigger salaries. So I move the amendment.
Senator moves the amendment. Just would remind the body, please give the senator who has the floor the attention. It is a bit noisy in here, please. This is the Senate of Maryland, folks. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I thank the minority leader for sharing the amendment with me earlier. I rise in opposition to the amendment, primarily because while I appreciate and share the minority leader's concern about the poorest of the poor, and everyone here shares that concern, what his amendment does is it limits the help so much that working people who earn $20,000 a year, $25,000 a year, as the majority leader said, these are not rich people who are going to get richer. These are working class people. And unfortunately, the minority leader's amendment limits it, cuts out tens of thousands of working class Maryland taxpayers. Therefore, I oppose the amendment.
All right. Are there any senators who wish to speak who have not yet spoken? If not, Chair recognizes Senator from Anne Arundel.
Yeah, just to be clear on the floor leader's comments, when he talks about working class, what this really is saying, what is our priority? Do we want to give working class people who are illegally in our country or unlawfully and give them $60-some million before we give it to the poorest of poor of our citizens, which was the original intent of the bill and was amended out? That's the crux of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Question is on the amendment. On the amendment.
I can have a roll call.
Senator requests a roll call. If there's no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 31 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 218 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 278, Senator Kagan, State Department of Education and Maryland Department of Health, Maryland School-Based Health Center Standards, Telehealth.
Let's see. The question before the body is the adoption of the one committee amendment. The floor amendment by the senator from Anne Arundel. Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Yes, I would like to withdraw that amendment.
Senator moves to withdraw the amendment. Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 278 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Senators, if there are no objections, let's quickly get the executive nominations report onto the floor. We're going to have to postpone it either way. If we could go to report number 3 of executive nominations, the clerk will read the report.
The Senate Executive Nominations Committee reports on the attached gubernatorial appointments and recommends that the Senate of Maryland advise and consent to these appointments.
Chair recognizes the chair of the Executive Nominations Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move favorable on the gubernatorial appointments in report number 3 of the Senate Executive Nomination Committee.
And Senator, do we want to postpone this one till Friday in open session?
I move we postpone it if you like.
Thank you, Senator. We will move to special order the nominations report until Friday in open session. Senators, please take a look at the report from the committee. If there are any names that senators wish to remove or separate out, we will be able to do that on Friday. Without objection, so ordered. All right, let's go to our special order calendar now. This is calendar number 13. The clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 95, Senator Kramer, Public Utilities, Investor-Owned Utilities, Prevailing Wage.
Question is on the adoption of the favorable report. On the report, Chair recognizes the senator from Frederick County.
Yeah, I have questions on the bill. If the floor leader could rise.
Question for the floor leader. Will the floor? Yes, appears so. Senator may proceed.
All right, and I'm actually, Mr. President, just a procedural question too. When does the committee testimony come up? Is it after we adopt the second reading report?
When does the committee testimony?
Yeah, because I just clicked the link and it's still not there.
So they are programming it so that once the committee report is released, it will be available to members. Is that? What do we have? It's not there yet. They're finalizing it this week for the switchover. So it is available if senators call the committee at any time, and that can be provided. But by the end of this week, we will have it so that it automatically is available once the committee report is released.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. So the question is, I'm familiar with prevailing wage requirements for public projects. This seems to be for privately owned gas and electric. Am I missing something here?
The only part you're missing is that it is investor-owned. Gas companies, electric companies, or combination gas and electric. Investor-owned.
I'm not familiar. Is there anywhere else in the law where we require prevailing wage on private or quote investor-owned projects? I know that I've seen prevailing wage for government construction or things with government money, but in this case, this is all quote investor-owned.
Public government infrastructure and construction projects is correct. This would apply prevailing wage to investor-owned and more specifically investor-owned gas, electric, or combinations for underground gas or electric infrastructure.
So have we ever would this be the first prevailing wage bill that is this the first prevailing wage on investor-owned or private sector only?
I'm not sure what
I guess my point is I'm unfamiliar anywhere in law where we've ever had prevailing wages. Usually if you build a road, you build a public project, you build a bridge, or you receive government money and the government ties it this way. But this strikes me as completely private lines, like Washington Gas, BG&E, the maintenance of their lines, correct?
There are some instances where it has been done. I believe it was particularly authorized in Baltimore City.
Do we know the examples?
I don't know whether it has actually been utilized to date.
Okay, I mean, it just strikes me as that's a big leap to go from requiring, the argument for prevailing wage was that you were using government money and government resources, taxpayer money, and therefore we had the power. And I didn't agree with the argument, but at least that was the argument, that we had the power to require prevailing wage. But now it strikes me as this is a huge leap in that we're going to private companies and demanding they pay prevailing wage. What was the argument for this bill?
Well, first of all, this is not that dissimilar to what we are doing right now. We are talking about infrastructure utilized by the public across the state. Very important public infrastructure that is operated by monopolies that have been granted by the state these monopoly rights to do this infrastructure work. The catalyst, in part, is that much of this infrastructure work had been done in-house. When utility companies had their own crews doing much of this work, they have since, in recent years, begun to contract out considerable amounts of work that used to be done in-house. And the goal here is to ensure, as is the case with prevailing wages historically, that labor does not become a focus of trying to shortchange construction work. And I'll give you a perfect example of how this comes into play because it happened to me. I have Verizon service at my residence, their utility, and they came and put in a copper line using their own forces because the copper to the house had been broken. The following day, using contracted sources, they came out to replace fiber optic, which didn't need replacement, and completely tore up the brand new installation of copper. When the Verizon technicians came back out, they looked at me and laughed and said, "This never would have happened in-house because we do a much better job of quality control, but what just happened to you is a consequence of contracting out of services." So the point here is, with this very critical public infrastructure of gas and electric utilities, that we ensure that a prevailing wage, which generally speaking is done now, Senator, just for your edification, generally speaking it is done on most all of these jobs anyway.
Well, so the example that you gave, Senator, I'm looking at the bill though, Verizon, Comcast, those utilities aren't in the bill. It's only gas and electric, correct?
You are absolutely correct.
Why did we pick those two utilities and exclude every other utility in the state?
I think I just covered that, but the point is, while it was an incredible inconvenience for me not to have telephone service, it did not jeopardize public safety, health, and welfare, as opposed to those itemized services that are incorporated into this legislation, specifically underground gas or electric infrastructure. In fact, we had a bill from the chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee in Finance just yesterday. And part of the concern addressed in that legislation is underground infrastructure and the risks to public health.
What is the effect of utility rates of this legislation?
Quite frankly, if you would take a look at the fiscal note, you will see that there may be no impact whatsoever to the rates.
I guess my understanding of the market is a little different. If you require people to pay more, then if you, the supply and demand, if you charge more for one side, the other side needs to go up. So how is it that is it the companies are already basically paying this and this doesn't do anything, or is it that they're just, the companies are going to eat it? I mean, last time I checked, they like to pass these charges on.
I will share with you that if you take the time to read the very thorough fiscal note attached to this legislation, that there is absolutely there are no empirical studies that indicate whatsoever that a prevailing wage drives up costs of a project.
I guess we'll have studies differ, but I appreciate it. Last question, because I don't have the committee testimony. Can you tell me who came in favor of this bill and who came in opposition to it?
There was considerable testimony in support of the legislation. There was no, both orally and written, there was no oral opposition at the bill hearing. The only written opposition came from Carville Collins, who is an attorney with DLA Piper, and a Lori Graff on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association.
Okay, and then the last, who testified in favor of it? Specifically, what organizations came in favor of this bill?
I will also point out that the utilities companies did not provide any opposition to this legislation. In support, there are individuals. I don't know whether I should be reading their names on the floor or not.
Okay, Senator, you can just do organizations. I'm curious what organizations wanted this.
I see only, according to this, it's only people who signed up listed as individuals.
So no labor unions came in favor of this legislation?
There were representatives. I know there are people who are associated with labor that did, but they were not signed up representing. I'm assuming that according to what I have, they may have been speaking as individuals, not necessarily representing labor.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
All right,
welcome.
Questions on the adoption of the favorable committee report? Chair recognizes the senator from the 45th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a couple questions for the floor sponsor.
The floor leader yield appears so. Senator may proceed.
Mr. Leader, in reference to prevailing wage is actually good for the taxpayers because it ensures that the worker has the ability to have a decent wage, also ensures that they have health care, and also ensures that they have some form of a retirement piece inside of that prevailing wage piece. Is that true or not?
That is accurate.
And most importantly, one of the things that I think that we all agree on in a bipartisan way, there's also rules and regs in reference to apprenticeships that's also inside of prevailing wage, correct?
That's correct.
I know that the question came up in reference to private projects. It was noticed that they talked about government projects and public works projects, but we also fund colleges, universities, private hospitals, or any type of capital project. And if they get 51% of that request from the state of Maryland, or 500, and that project is 500,000 or more, that's obligated to prevailing wage, correct?
Correct.
And also, just to move more towards the utilities piece of it. So when we look at our utilities and we're doing projects such as Stride, and we're doing a number of these gas projects all throughout the state of Maryland, this is subsidized by taxpayers, correct?
Correct.
So when we think about those folks that are working on those projects for those utilities that are subsidized by our taxpayers, it is to the benefit of the taxpayers to be able to make sure that they have a good wage, make sure that they have health care, and make sure that they can retire with dignity when that time comes, correct?
That's correct. And by the way, those wages go right back into local economies to support local small business operations.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Senator. Questions on the adoption of the favorable committee report? Any further discussion on the report? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 95 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 41, Senator Augustine, Health, Mental, and Emotional Disorders Consent Mental Health Access Initiative.
All right, question is on the adoption of the favorable committee report. Chair recognizes the senator from the Lower Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Mr. President. And if the bill sponsor would...
Will the floor leader yield for questions?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Senator may proceed.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for the courtesy you extended me to go through the testimony and to go through the questions that I've been receiving from parents and from the different medical organizations. And I just wanted to note, given the volume, and it did take a while to get the testimony from the committee, so again, I appreciate that. But I wanted to go through and just highlight some of the questions that the parents raised, as well as some of the questions that the medical experts raised who opposed it, since the bill did come out without amendments to address some of those concerns. I wanted to start with the parents. We had parents who I've heard from and who also testified asking questions about who pays if a minor child accesses consultation, diagnosis, or treatment by a healthcare provider or clinic. There's questions about the diagnosis, and this is an area that I actually took some time to talk to my nephew, who is a school psychologist, to better understand this. Because one of the points raised was consenting to a diagnosis is very serious mental health diagnosis, can follow a child for their entire life. And when I talked to my nephew about this, he underscored this point about these mental health diagnoses following the child, saying that you need to be aware that some of the those diagnoses can cut off future opportunities for these children. Again, because we're lowering the age to your bill from 16 to 12, so we would be cutting off opportunities for children, such as certain diagnoses that perhaps they could not join the military in the future. So I think those are very serious questions when we have 12-year-olds involved with these diagnoses. There's a question.
Excuse me, Senator. Senator's getting a bit loud in the chamber, please. It echoes, especially with the plexiglass. So please keep your attention on the center.
Thank you. There's questions about the intention of the bill for schools to provide these services, a question mark. Where else would a 12-year-old go for the services? And there's a point from the parents that minors cannot vet the professionals they see the way adults can. So what if they see a poor clinician who diagnoses and labels them inappropriately or possibly abuses them? And then we have the question of maturity. What standardized tool will all providers use to assess which children are mature and capable of giving informed consent at the age of 12? Now again, those are serious questions that came from parents that were not addressed in any amendments that came out of committee. Now I wanted to also point out that I took some time, and again I appreciate the extension on the time, but I wanted to actually go through and turn to the medical experts, because I am not a medical expert. So I went and I looked at the testimony from the Board of Nursing, and they said they testified in opposition to lowering the age from 16 to 12. And they said the board does not believe that minors as young as 12 years old have the capacity to understand the processes that may be required in mental and emotional health treatments. The bill language is ambiguous in that it does not define how a healthcare provider would determine a minor to be mature and capable of giving informed consent. Maturity can be displayed in numerous ways, and unless clearly defined, would be assessed variably by each healthcare provider. The ultimate effect of this bill would be that a child as young as 12 years old could be consenting to a treatment without understanding the risk, the benefits, or alternatives. Children, as we know, are extremely impressionable, and many feel pressured to consent. While some minors possess an adult-like intelligence, and I want to acknowledge that, there are still many intricacies around receiving a consultation, a diagnosis, and subsequent treatment for a mental or emotional disorder. From the Maryland Psychiatric Society, SB 41 arbitrarily tasks mental health providers with determining a minor to be mature and capable of giving informed consent. Again, this maturity issue that keeps coming back up. Such capacity assessments go well beyond a mere conversation with the minor and are potentially complicated.
I know. Yep.
Almost every effective strategy at treating younger children with mental illness benefits from the involvement of the parent or guardian. Parent or guardian involvement undisputedly increases the effectiveness of most therapies, and some interventions require such participation to even occur. Starting a child in treatment and then later involving a parent or guardian would result in a highly problematic dynamic between the mental health provider and the parent or guardian that would be difficult to repair. And also from the Maryland Psychological Association, they just flat out state most preteen and younger teenage children do not have the cognitive capacity to consent to such treatment without parental involvement, and it is not developmentally appropriate to expect them to be able to do so. So to the bill sponsor, and with respect, I did read through the questions that the parents were raising. I did read through the medical experts, their opposition, and why they were opposed, and the questions they were raising. And so I think it took some of us by surprise that this bill came out with no amendments to address those issues. And just, again, going from 16 to 12 is quite a significant drop with these serious questions being raised. And again, I thank the bill sponsor for his courtesy.
Absolutely. So there are just a few things that I would say in response. So, that was a significant amount that you talked about there. Part of the reason why there was no amendments is because this body passed this bill in its current form last year, and it ran out of time. We already went through the process in the last session to make changes, including the mature and capable that you talked about, because it originally came in last year without that information. So we went through the deliberative process to provide those extra protections. Another thing that I would just share with you, well, first of all, we want to say that parental involvement is optimal. But this is about those kids where the parental involvement maybe is not an option for them. One of the things that I will share with you, as I've just been here waiting patiently for this bill to come forward, I just want to share with you about this. There was a young woman who I was interviewing. She was applying to my alma mater and stuff like that. And she shared with me that she wanted to become, I asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up. She said she wanted to be a physician. She said she wanted to work with kids, particularly kids who were struggling with mental health and stuff like that, because she suffered with it. And so many kids had confided in her, and they felt so uncomfortable. They felt like they couldn't talk to their parents about it. And so she thought that this was something that, a way that she could help other kids. And then she shared with me that she spoke to her mother one time. She said to her mom, she said, "Mom, I think I'm feeling depressed." And this was a young woman who is of Caribbean descent, tremendous stigma associated with behavioral health, mental health in that community. And her mother said to her, "No, you don't. You do not have a mental illness. And if you did, or you were, you would be forsaking God." Now, I just want you to stick with that for a little bit. I want you to stick with that the burden that this young woman had, and what she has suggested to me is that when she does get out of this home, she is going to try to get the help that she needs for herself. Now, what the thing is that you said, you talked about the testimony of some of the opponents, which you didn't really talk about all the proponents who are the people who actually work with these young kids, who are all proponents of this. But one of the things that you did say, and that I found in all of the testimony of those who were opposed to this legislation, is that they frequently talked about the mature and capable standard, and there was uncertainty about it. But the reality is this: they all said most. They all said some. These folks, these professionals are trained. They're trained. Their training allows them to determine the status of mature and capable, just in the same way that they do in other places. If they determine that the child is not mature and capable, then they don't serve them. They go and get the parental consult, okay? That is the nature of this. Is a thoughtful piece of legislation where we are trying to reach these children who right now don't have someone to talk to. Right now, the person who is licensed, a healthcare provider, is prevented from talking to these children, and that's what we're trying to remedy with this piece of legislation.
Thank you, and I appreciate the bill sponsors going through the history. Again, I don't recall an engaged debate on this bill last year, really having a serious debate of going from 16 to 12, and I think we do need to have that. And I appreciate, I think we have the same shared goal here as far as our children and the mental health issues that they're facing. So we accept that together. What I don't see in the bill are the safeguards. I do believe that we have, I do believe we have both parents and medical experts that are raising significant questions, and that coming up with how we can better protect our children through this process and putting maybe some safeguards. And that's why I was surprised that it came out of committee without some of those issues being addressed. And again, I appreciate your response and this debate.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from Anne Arundel.
Thank you. Will the senator from the 47th yield?
Yes, sir.
So, Senator, may proceed.
Yes, sir.
I can't really see you, but I'm assuming you're over there. And thank you. So I think we all, well, I can speak for myself, we agree that there are issues that need to be dealt with. I think the real debate is whether we should move the current age from 16, whether down to 15 or 14 or 13 or 12, as this bill has. So I was looking into this, and I was curious if you knew how many states have this down to 12 years old. Are we like one of 40 other states that do this?
I don't have the numbers right in front of me, sir. There are a number of states, I want to say 10, that actually do not have a standard. They allow for the medical professionals to determine it. There are also a series, I want to say the number is relatively few, who have the standard set at the age of 12.
Okay. I reached out to NCSL, and I actually have a document here. What states are you talking about that you know about that have 12 years old?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What states are you aware that you mentioned that are 12 years old? What states do you know that?
If you bear with me, I could look it up.
Okay, I'll share with you what I found, and then maybe you can provide that offline to me. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, only one has it, and that's California. And then they also have some other things, qualifications like we have in our law. So we would be only the second state out of 50 to pass this. And I was looking at other, as they call, more progressive states. And Oregon is 15, Washington is 14, and I can go down the line, but none are 12 or 13, except for California, which just recently did that. So the other thing is this whole thing about maturity. It says, who is determined by a healthcare provider to be mature and capable of giving consent. Say I'm a healthcare practitioner. You're a healthcare practitioner. We got a bunch in here. What standards do we use to determine if somebody's mature? I can know my child very well, and you get a first glance and talk at him, you say, you have a very mature son. And I would say, Senator, if you knew him, you would not say that. And I'm not saying that personally about my son, but just as an example. So what standards will a health care provider use to determine if they are mature? Because it seems very subjective from one practitioner to the other.
So, Senator, there is not a uniform standard. Similar to the reality that there is not a uniform standard for competency. It is the training of the healthcare professional that they have gone through that allows them to make that judgment. It is a part of their licensure. It's a part of that process that they have this, and they must do this with all of the patients that they serve. This is not something that is unique to age. This is just allowing them, it's asking that they must do this with these patients.
So you say they're trained to be able to determine maturity. In their training, do they have criteria which they use to determine who is mature or who isn't? Or is it subjective in their training as well?
It's not that consent is not something that is objective, but it is a part of the training as we discussed last year on this.
I'm not talking about consent, I'm talking about maturity.
Right, but the mature and capable standard, right, really goes to helping for them helping to clarify the consent, which is is really what we're talking about. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it clearer that in order for them to consent, that we're asking that they look at the maturity and at their maturity, but it does not necessarily, this is part of the training of those healthcare professionals in order to do so.
Okay. I think just at a glance of this, the average person on Maryland would say, if somebody has to say immature and you take 10 different people, you could have 10 different opinions. But that being aside, you mentioned to the last speaker, the reason we should move forward with this, we worked it out last year, we got it all settled, and we voted. So my question to you is, if we got this all settled and we worked it out so that there are no amendments on the bill, why was there so much opposition from the medical experts if you worked it out?
There was the preponderance of the testimony was in support of this. There was actually, the actual number of groups who were against this was not beyond the individuals. It was far more the professionals who treat these children are in support of this legislation.
So you have the bill folder with you, I'm assuming?
Excuse me?
You have the bill folder with you?
I sure do.
So how many were in favor and how many were opposed?
That's what I was going through. I was going through the fact of the individuals.
Just numbers.
The individuals who were in support were 13. The unfavorables, which included a series of individual parents, without a doubt, were 18.
So you're saying the preponderance was favorable, but didn't you just say it was 13 in favor and 18 opposed?
The majority of those people who were opposed, the majority of those numbers were individuals who, in essence, they had their chance to say that, but the preponderance of the people who work with children support the legislation.
Okay, and the last question is, those who oppose, because I don't have it on my screen here, can you just list the organizations that were opposed to this?
Sure. Those who oppose.
Just organizations.
Yep, just the organization, not all the individuals. Sure. MPS.
What's that?
That's the Maryland Psychological Society, Washington Psychological Society.
Okay.
And the Maryland, it says Maryland Psychological Society here as well. And a group called Love Maryland PAC, and a group called Health Choice Maryland. Those are the groups, those are the organizations.
The Board of Nursing was not against this?
I apologize. I'm trying to, forgive me.
No problem.
Let me look at.
And maybe the psychiatric?
Oh, you know what it is? And I apologize for that. It doesn't show it as the Board of Nursing because it comes in under the health department. But yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So there was a lot of opposition to this. We were given the impression today that they've worked this out, we voted it, we worked out the kinks last year, and we just need to move forward with it. That's why we didn't amend it.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all I had from the floor leader. So what we did is we actually looked back at the testimony. I'm not a medical expert. Most of us aren't medical experts here. And we rely on the testimony. And so when you see 4 or 5 major organizations, health experts, say we have real concerns about this bill, and we just move it to the floor with no amendment, it gives me pause. Why are we ignoring their opposition? Normally in the committees, we try to work things out and bring a better product to the floor. So when there's so much opposition to this, when there's only one other state in the nation who has lowered this to 12, I guess my question is, rhetorically, why are we bringing this out to the floor? So those are my concerns with it. I'm going to have an amendment when we adopt, if we could.
Okay, Senator. So Chair recognizes the senator from District 34.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a brief question for the floor leader, if I could.
Senator may proceed.
So my issue is with the prescription medications used to treat mental illness, and I know the bill says that that this consent does not apply. It says the subsection does not include the capacity to consent to the use of prescription medications to treat mental or emotional disorders. But then the preface to that is except as otherwise provided under this subtitle. So my question is, what that particular language, the exception, what would the conditions be that would allow for a person 16 and under to consent to the use of prescription medications to treat mental or emotional disorder?
Thank you. So we already have in law the age of 12 for certain other categories. This would include substance use and substance abuse, for example. This would include issues with regard to sexual matters where a child can provide their own consent. That is the law that we have right now for those categories. The only thing that we're trying to do here is trying to actually have our law with regard to those categories match for these behavioral health outcomes.
Okay, so if I understand, so we're not changing anything on those categories, and what you're trying to do by the exception is just saying we're not trying to change the law on those other categories that we've already approved for 16 and under.
But exactly, and just to your point, what we have put here, which is one of those safeguards that we did work out last year, was to explicitly say that with this, we cannot provide, the children cannot consent to medication. And that's why we put that there as one of those safeguards that was worked out last year.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
All right, question is on the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any further discussion on the report? Not. All in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. Oh, I'm sorry. Strike that. Chair recognizes the senator from District 6.
I just have one question to the floor leader. Thank you.
Senator may proceed.
We know that a lot of children are labeled in school today. They're labeled because they have ADHD or ADD or other types of ailments, of disorders. And the parent takes the child to get evaluated. And when they get evaluated, the outcome is they're literally labeled as if they're ADHD or ADD or a type of disable or behavior disorder. Knowing that the parent took the child there and the parent knows this, and that is a very serious issue that they know, because most of the time they're medicating these children because of these things. And then we're going to have these kids that are, just say, 13, 12 years old, and the parent knowing more than whoever is counseling them or anybody else. I think it would be so important for a parent to be a part of this. Wouldn't you agree?
Thank you, Senator. And as I said, it is that. That's what that's the outcome that we hope for in most instances. I will note that in what you said, though, at the end of the day, even in that instance, we still depend on the medical professional to do the diagnosis, which does not change. The medical professional is the one that we trust in this process based on their training, based on their licensure to provide that diagnosis. That does not change with this piece of legislation. The only thing that changes with this piece of legislation is that those children who right now don't have the ability to talk to these licensed professionals because of this law get the opportunity to do so. Now, when they do that, and this is something that has not been discussed but is very important, they will not, and we put this again as a protection in the bill, they cannot initiate payment for that. They can't do that. This is simply in the best interest of the child. So what does that mean? That means that those providers have every incentive to involve the parent. Why? Because the parent initiates the payment of what's going on. The other thing that I've learned in this process is that many times these professionals, they are actually a person who this young person can trust to help open up the relationship with the parent that otherwise wouldn't have been there in the way that I expressed to you earlier in this commentary.
And I understand that. Just thank you very much. But just to continue on, as you stated in that statement just now, you said with the parent. That's the important part of my point of view, I can say.
And I support that 100%. This bill is about those children who do not have that. This is about children who are afraid. This is about, unfortunately, Lauren Santiago, a woman who came and testified in our committee about this report, who shared with me on Monday on Facebook the fact that this is the anniversary of her having to cut her daughter down when she hung herself. And she comes over the last 2 years to testify on this bill because she wishes that her daughter was able to talk to someone. She wishes for a better outcome for these young children who don't feel like they have someone to talk to. And the law says to those providers, you can't talk to them. That's what this is about.
And I understand that point, but I think most of all, the parent knows best for that child, and the parent knows the child more than anyone else, and parent knows the situation and should never be left out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Chair recognizes the Chair of Finance Committee.
Colleagues, I think the members of the Finance Committee and the sponsor of this bill would wish that in every case where a child is struggling and suffering mental illness or depression, that the parent or the person who is in the role of the parent could be there for that child, and that they could assist the child with prognosis and with help. Sometimes that's available, but there are times when it is not. There are parents who cannot accept or who feel that they have somehow failed, or some who simply are a part of the problem. Thank God that is not most of the time, but for some children, there is no supportive adult or family member or parent who can assist. And we do not want the situation that where help is not available, and remember, the average child is not finding it fun or glitzy or the neat thing to do to say, I am struggling, I am suffering, I'm mentally depressed, or I feel that my own immediate psychosocial relationships with my family are not supportive of me, or I'm not accepted. But there are children living in families in which, in some cases, they are not accepted. They are not wanted. They are not valued. And so we aren't talking about the majority of children, but for those in a minority, but a significant minority, where help is not otherwise available. And we aren't paying these healthcare providers to separate kids from their families or to remove supports that are psychosocially there for them already. We simply don't want some children to be totally without help and to end up in undesirable or circumstances, or even to be victims of suicide. And so the bill isn't there for a great number of kids, but it ought to be there as a last resort for those kids that need it. And we would ask you to please remember those kids when you vote for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Is there any senator who has not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, the chair recognizes the senator from Anne Arundel County.
Thank you. If the floor leader would yield, I just have a question about one of your comments.
Floor Leader Pearso, Senator may proceed.
So at the conclusion of our discussion, you mentioned something very quickly, and it didn't process. You said that we already have in Maryland the capability of 12-year-olds being able to have consultation with STDs and things like that. Is that correct?
I did say that.
And is that for all 12-year-olds?
I'm sorry?
Is that available for all 12-year-olds?
I'm just trying to, I don't have the answer to that as far as like what you're saying. I mean, it says a minor can consent at any age to a long series of issues that are related to sexual issues.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the fiscal note, and maybe you can provide it to me. But right before that, it says a minor has the same capacity as an adult to consent to medical or dental treatment if, 1, they are married, 2, the parent of a child, or 3, living separately and apart from their minor's parents or guardian and self-supporting. So is that the qualifications that you're referring to, that they can have those services as an adult?
No, that is for an entirely separate set of qualifications.
Okay. For third reader, could you just reference where you're talking about so I can look that up for third reader?
Sure.
Or at least provide it to me after.
Sure. I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Thank you. So I would like to have a second reader roll call on this. And if I could just state, I don't think this is ready for prime time, ladies and gentlemen. We have significant, not a lone little opposition, but we have significant, actually more opposition to this bill than actually supported it, as referenced by the floor leader. And they weren't just individuals. These were the medical experts coming and testifying, whether written or verbally. They have serious concerns about this bill. It needs work. Please do something. And despite all those medical experts, we're always clamoring for the departments and all to come in and give their opinion. They weighed in. They opposed it. And we have a bill before us without a single amendment. They ignored the medical experts. And we're not talking about a little fluff piece of legislation. There are concerns, as we've heard the chair before, talk about children don't have the same capacity as adults. And I know she's talking about other issues related to that, but we're not saying 16, 17, 18-year-olds. We're saying 12-year-olds. Put a face on that. I'm not saying we can't pass a bill, but this is not the right one. We need to take input from the experts. We have a job to do down here, and we can't simply ignore the experts. So I say either put it back to committee or vote it down today. It's not ready. Thank you.
All right, Senators request a roll call. Questions on the favorable committee report? Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the affirmative, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes Senator from Anne Arundel. Has an amendment?
Yes, thank you.
Senator, could please read the amendment number?
Thank you. Senate Bill 41/383326/1.
All right. All right, does everyone have it on their floor laptops? So, Senator may explain the amendment.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, what this bill is doing is saying that a 12-year-old doesn't have to get consent from a parent. And so we want to make sure that they are protected under the law in case anything goes wrong, from any range all the way up to suicide. So I reached out to legal counsel, and they said it implies limitations on liability the way this bill is worded. So all this amendment does is say, if something goes wrong, that the physician or whoever it is, the healthcare provider, will be liable for it. Very simple amendment. Hopefully it's a friendly amendment. I don't think anybody would not want that to happen, especially after I talked to legal counsel. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Minority Leader, for sharing this with me previous. I really do appreciate that. But I am going to ask the body to resist this amendment. This is redundant in the sense that the malpractice concerns that would come about from this amendment are already in the court statute. It is also simply a poison pill. And then all it would try to do is really have a chilling effect on providers that would in essence scare them such that it would in essence just kill the bill or kill the intent and make it such that no one would serve these children who so desperately need this services. So I ask the body to resist this amendment. Thank you.
All right, questions on the amendment? Any senators wish to speak who have not yet spoken? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd prefer if we not went after senators' motives as far as this, I'm putting it in to be a poison pill. Senator, that's not my intention. I care about children. I want to make sure they're protected. The opposition was saying this is a poison pill. If we put it in, it's going to have problems. And then in the same breath, he says, we already have this. So what is it? Is it a poison pill or something we already have in law? And when I talked to legal counsel, which we respect because I'm not a lawyer, they said this, the way it's worded, places limitations on the liability of the healthcare provider. Now, if you want limitations on the healthcare provider, then you don't want this amendment. But at the same point, the floor leader said, this will scare healthcare people away. Why would it scare health people away if it's already the law? Right? I asked for a favorable on the amendment.
All right, questions on the amendment? Any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The nays have it. The amendment.
That's a roll call on that.
All right, Senator requests a roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the negative, the
Can I just
Senator's
explain my
amendment
vote,
fails.
Mr. President?
Senator, yes. Senator may take 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Yeah, I can't believe we just voted that people shouldn't be held liable, so that makes sense with all our liability laws and everything. So, of course, if you're dealing with minors without their parents' consent, and now they'll be held liable. So I was proud to vote for that amendment.
Thank you, Senator. All right. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 41 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 316, Senator Klossmeyer, Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard, Hydroelectric Power.
Question before the body is on the floor amendment offered by the senator from Frederick County. Chair recognizes the vice chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I spoke earlier to the sponsor of the amendment. So just in a nutshell, this amendment that the gentleman has offered is a new issue. Previously, we've had a discussion on the floor about removing waste to energy from the RPS program entirely. This particular amendment takes it from a Tier 1 status down to Tier 2. That is an issue that, in all candor, we have not dealt with in the committee before. It's never been a standalone bill or otherwise. At the same time, it does present an important issue, and to that effect, we need to have a good understanding of how the implications of the amendment are on our renewable energy credit market, potential impacts on ratepayers, and also the interplay between this amendment, if it were adopted, the interplay with other parts of the RPS program. For example, this bill deals with hydropower. We've got other bills in the committee currently dealing with other potential modifications to the current program. We need to deal with this not on a piecemeal basis, but I think from a committee standpoint very holistically. And so for that reason, because again, we've got other bills in the committee currently, I would move that we recommit this bill back to the committee so the committee can take a broader view, potentially come back to the body with several issues in one bill. So any event, that's the motion. We'd like to take a look at this holistically, not piecemeal. But I do want to say that we do appreciate the gentleman bringing this amendment to the floor, and so I would move to recommit the bill at this time back to the Finance Committee, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Just procedurally, we have an amendment on the floor. Would the maker of the amendment have any objections withdrawing the amendment to recommit? If there are no objections, the amendment has been withdrawn from the floor. The floor leader has moved to recommit the bill. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the bill shall be recommitted to the Finance Committee. All right, we're going to pause there. We're hitting our 2-hour mark. I'm sorry. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from the Middle Eastern Shore.
Thank you very much. Senate Bill 41, yea to nay. Thank you.
41. Senator is requested to move from yea to nay. Does not change the outcome. No objections. So ordered. All right. Next up, we've got, or let's do announcements. So we'll get to the rest on Friday. Chair recognizes the Chair of the Finance Committee.
Our Finance Committee will begin its bill hearings at 1 p.m.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the Chair of Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. President. Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs will start the hearings at 1:30, followed by a voting session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chair recognizes the Chair of Budget and Taxation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We begin hearings at 1 with a voting session to follow.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Judicial Proceedings Committee will meet at 1:15, followed by a voting session.
Thank you, Senator. All right. Any other announcements? Standing committees, delegations, select committees? If not, one administrative note. Friday. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from District 8. Chair of Baltimore County.
Yes. Thank you. We will meet at 8:30 on Friday morning.
8:30 Friday morning, Baltimore County. Any other delegations? All right. Friday, the intention is to be here. So we will do, if there is any way for us to be on the floor on Friday, we will be. The big question mark is whether or not the testing site will be open. So please make sure to check your phones and emails. We will send out a text message the moment we have any additional information, but our goal is to do whatever we possibly can to be here on Friday. But hope everybody stays safe in the snow. If there are no other points of order, let's do a quorum call before adjournment.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 47 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Friday, February 19th at 12 p.m.
Without objection, so ordered. Stay safe, wear your mask, get your vaccine.